Good afternoon and welcome to Not Minding My Own Business. I'm your estate planning and elder law attorney, Russell Farbiars, and I'm joined here today by attorney Beth Bowers from Haggerty, Goldberg, Schleifer, and Coopersmith. Whew, that's a mouthful, isn't it?
It is.
Welcome, Beth.
Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon. It's very nice to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And Beth, you have the privilege, at least I think it's the privilege, of being the first attorney other than me to be on this show.
Oh.
But I wanted to invite you on the show because what you do as an injury and a workers' compensation attorney is such important work. And truthfully, I don't know anything about it because I don't do it. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do to help your clients at, I'm not going to say all the names again, HGSK, right? That's how you guys market yourselves.
I was going to say, yes, to make it easier on everyone, we go by HGSK. So again, thank you so much for having me here, and I am certainly honored to be the first attorney on your podcast. So in my firm, HGSK, we handle a variety of different, I guess we could say broadly, personal injury matters. Car accidents, slip and falls, work injuries, medical malpractice, and we have teams of attorneys who do specialize in different areas. I pretty much exclusively handle workers' compensation matters. So I'm representing individuals who have been hurt on the job, in the workplace. And what we do kind of runs the gamut. We sometimes are just giving guidance to people who are having their benefits paid, they're being taken care of by their employers and the insurance companies, and some people who aren't. And then we are able to go to court for them, file petitions, do different things that they need in order to have appropriate legal representation. It's a wonderful job. I love what I do. I love being able to help people, even if it's just sometimes just sitting with them and hearing them out and saying, yeah, everything is actually going the way it's supposed to. You don't really need a lawyer. But I would say, our firm kind of does that broadly with respect to all different types of cases. As I said, all aspects of personal injury, including actually Social Security disability as well. We actually handle that additionally.
That's good. That's always good to know. So maybe what would be helpful, I know a little bit about workers' comp. I've never practiced in that area, but maybe you could sort of take us through like what does it look like from a claimant's perspective if they get injured at work? What can they expect and what should be happening?
Well, I think those are two different answers. So I'll start with what should happen. So the law in Pennsylvania, there's a Pennsylvania Workers' Compensation Act.
And before you continue, I just want to make clear to our listeners that whatever Attorney Bowers says or I say is not legal advice for you. It is just for educational purposes.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. In Pennsylvania, if an employee is hurt on the job, their injury should be covered by the Pennsylvania Workers' Compensation Act. It's a state law, and it provides for a number of different rights and responsibilities. So rights for the workers and responsibilities of the employers and its insurance company. I always like to tell people, if you want to have a business you want to run a business in Pennsylvania and employ someone, you have to have a workers' compensation policy. It's like having liability insurance for your customers to come in. You want to drive a car in Pennsylvania, you have to have car insurance. So it's the same principle. It's a cost of doing business. Every employer should have a workers' compensation policy to cover its employees. So when an individual is hurt, they should advise the employer of the injury as soon as possible. Let the employer know, what happened, how they're feeling, what the injuries are from their perspective, not a medical perspective, what they're feeling. From there, the employer is supposed to report the injury to its insurance company, and the insurance company is supposed to report the injury to the state. Just kind of let the Bureau of Workers' Compensation know that an injury has been reported. The insurance company is supposed to investigate the injury and either decide to acknowledge it, accept it in some capacity, or deny it. Either way, the employee is supposed to be notified of the decision, and then from there, if they're not happy with the decision, they can talk to a lawyer and pursue benefits further. So that's really what should happen. Unfortunately, sometimes the employers don't always report the injuries to their insurance companies, or the insurance companies know about it, but they don't always accept or deny. And it kind of leaves people in a difficult area of uncertainty. And they'll come to me and they will, have questions like, my employer knows I got hurt. I fell in front of someone. I'm being sent for treatment, but nothing's happening. I'm not getting paid. I'm out of work. So every case is extremely unique. And one of the things we really pride ourselves on is that when somebody comes in, there's no like one size fits all solution to every case. They come in, we do an intake. And if someone can't come in physically because of their injuries, we might go to them or do it by phone. And we listen to them and we start investigating it on our end. What can we find out? What is the legal status of the case? If they haven't been sent for medical treatment, we'll send them for medical treatment. We, partner with doctors who understand the system. So we really try to just make sure that if the insurance company and the employer aren't taking care of those rights that the employee has, that we do everything in our power to help make sure that those rights are being, met, and that the employee is being taken care of legally and medically to the extent that we have any power over that.
Okay. Now, workers' compensation policies, are those mandatory for employers or are they optional?
No, they are mandatory unless the employer wants to be self-insured. Okay. So one way or another, the employer has to be able to cover its employees for a work injury. Some municipalities a lot of times are self-insured, and they'll pay their own claims, but an employer that fails to either carry a workers' compensation policy or be self-insured for the policy, or effectively have its own internal policy, is subject to criminal prosecution for failing to carry insurance. And a lot of times the employers will, if they are prosecuted by the state, they oftentimes get ARD, they pay fines and all of that. But it's obviously it's against the law. They're required to hold insurance in some capacity.
Okay. And then where typically would you get involved, and what do you do to help claimants?
Sure. There's a variety of different ways in which we get involved. Some people are very proactive after they get hurt, and they'll come to us very early on and say, here's what happened. I'm out of work. I'm getting paid. The insurance company is taking care of all of my bills, but I just want to know what rights I have. And I'll sit with them and I'll explain everything is being done correctly. Because workers' compensation only provides for payment of wage loss if someone is either out of work or like missing hours, so it can be total or partial, and payment of medical bills. I like to dispel early on with folks that there's never any payment of pain and suffering in workers' compensation, no matter how serious the injury may be. So that is something a lot of times people don't know when they come to us, and that's something they're seeing commercials about personal injury and pain and suffering. They think that's applicable in workers' comp, which it's not. Mm-hmm. But what I like to do, if someone comes to us early on, we might just say to them, okay, I'm going to explain the system to you, and we're going to effectively just monitor your case and see if at any point we need to get involved. I make it a habit, and I think I can speak for the rest of my team on this. We're not going to file petitions for the sake of filing petitions. I always say there's no reason to stir the pot if the insurance company is doing everything correctly. But part of what we do is we are there to answer questions for the injured worker. Okay. So that's oftentimes how people come to us. Other times they come to us because they're at home and they're not getting paid, or they're working, but they're working fewer hours, losing money, and they're frustrated, or their treatment isn't being covered, and they come to us and we look at it and we may decide together, okay, this is something where we need to file a petition to get the appropriate wage loss benefits paid, or to have your medical bills covered, or a combination of both.
What is typically a reason why the insurance company would not just do what they're required to do? And I know that's like the elephant in the room,
right? No, oftentimes what I see is that if anyone has had, we see a lot of low back pain. I mean, in our, in work injuries in general. I don't know the statistics on it, but many work injuries involve some element of back pain. And it's not uncommon for someone to have had problems with their back in the past. Mm-hmm. And if the insurance company knows about that or the employer knows about that, they may then want to deny this case, this new injury, by saying, well, this is a pre-existing problem that you had. Even though the law is very clear that an aggravation of a pre-existing condition is considered an injury in Pennsylvania. So it's this idea, and obviously you know this from law school, but this idea that the employer takes you as you are when they hire you. If you are more susceptible to developing carpal tunnel, then, and you develop it as a result of the work activities, so be it. I mean, the employer can't deny the injury or the claim simply because you are more susceptible. If there is an actual medical connection, the employer should be responsible for the injury.
Yeah, I mean, and that makes sense, especially because I don't know if you mentioned this, and this is going back to my years in law school, so maybe it's not completely correct, but in exchange for this workers' comp system, the employee can't sue the employer for an injury at work.
Correct.
So it's a give and take there. So it was just seemed to me that it makes sense to pay for the injuries that people incur. Now, of course, I say that, I my employees, primarily work at a computer, so the injuries are certainly not as severe. I'm sure you've had cases of very severe injury and possibly death that are, much more significant. But what is sort of the most interesting sort of case that you've had in workers' comp?
Oh boy. It's hard to say. What's interesting about the field, because originally, just to kind of go back for a moment, I started out my legal career as a prosecutor in Chester County. So of course I was seeing, every day was different. I was in district court or I was in the court of common pleas, and everything was just so unique and different and interesting. And then I completely switched gears to get into the workers' compensation field. And for about 5 years, I actually worked on the other side, representing insurance companies and employers. So I've done both sides. I've been with HGSK for a little over 10 years now, and I absolutely love this field. And I love being on this side where we're getting to make an individual difference and help people. So the one thing that is so interesting about this, when I think about how I started off in the criminal field, is that every day is still so different. Every case is so different. So there's aspects of different cases that are so interesting, like cases where there's, someone is injured as a result of a fight at work, which those are oftentimes assuming that the altercation, or like if someone is assaulted. I've had a number of different clients who have been assaulted. If the altercation is related to work, it should be covered. But a lot of times employers want to fight, no pun intended, the claim and say, well, they had a disagreement about something else. The assault was related to an outside external issue. And those are always kind of factually interesting. It's hard to say, obviously, without saying too much about any one particular case, but
of course,
it really is one of those, there's no cookie cutter case. And I have to dispel this with clients, they'll come to me and they'll say, well, I know somebody who had a back injury and they got XYZ in their settlement. And I'll have to say to them, well, every case is so different based on the judge it's in front of, the jurisdiction, actually, even in terms of how cases sometimes are valued and settled, and the employer, whether you're working or why maybe if you were terminated. There's just, it keeps you on your toes for sure.
Absolutely. I started my career as a prosecutor as well.
Oh, okay.
So I was in Berks County, but I know exactly what you mean. That every day is different, and when you're a young attorney, it all seems so exciting at the time.
It does.
But you at least you stayed sort of close in terms of litigation. I obviously went in a different direction. But what do you think about your time as being a prosecutor that helps you in what you're doing now?
Well, this is what I would recommend to anyone who's in law school and considering a legal career. Absolutely find an internship in the DA's office or public defender's office. If those places are willing to put you in a courtroom in front of a judge, it is 100% hands down the best experience you can gain. When I was in law school and interning in the DA's office, they put us out in the district courts handling preliminary hearings. And it was quite literally trial by fire. It was, but I gained an incredible amount of confidence and argument skills that have carried on to this day. And even just the ability to engage with attorneys, all different types of attorneys, and have, it is an adversarial system. We're advocating for our clients, but we can also treat each other with respect and treat the court with respect and work together in a lot of different ways to accomplish goals. I always tell people, it's not like on TV.
Yeah, civility matters a lot.
It does.
And sometimes I think there are certain members of the bar that forget that. But civility, I think, matters a lot in terms of achieving our goals for our clients, as well as treating each other with respect.
I agree completely.
Yeah. So now you mentioned that there are different jurisdictions for workers' comp court. So explain how that works.
Sure. Well, because it is a state system, when we have our hearings, they're not actually held in like the common pleas court. So here in Reading or in Berks County, the hearings, if held in person, because we are still a largely virtual practice since COVID took over, are held at the state office building on Cherry Street, just down from the Santander Arena. And so that is something where I've had to make sure my clients are aware of that in the past, where, they're not going to the courthouse, the common pleas courthouse. So because it's really an administrative forum. Mm-hmm. So there are certain judges who are assigned to the Berks County location and certain judges in Lancaster County, but they're all state employees and they are essentially administrative law judges. And a lot of them will have different procedures about how they run their courtrooms, their trial schedules. So it's important for anyone who's experiencing this, if someone has a work injury. I mean, I think it's worth talking to a lawyer early on just to understand the process, understand your options. And I think it's a good idea to choose an attorney who's familiar with that area where your case might be held, which is typically going to be the county of the injured worker where they live, if they live in Pennsylvania, because every judge is a little bit different. And there is something I think to be said about if you practice in front of the same judges all the time, you know the system and you understand the judge's procedures and preferences. So I think that's important. I should note, too, that there's no charge to speak with a claimant's attorney, someone who does what I do. We do not charge a fee to anyone who comes in and wants to speak with us, and if they need legal advice. So if I have someone who's getting paid and the insurance company is doing everything right, I might monitor their case for months and never receive a fee. It's just, we only get paid if we go to court and a judge approves our fee. I do like to tell people that because I think people are concerned, well, if I go to a lawyer, it's going to cost me a lot of money, so I'll just try to handle this on my own. But the workers' comp field is contingent fee basis.
Okay. And so do you think, you said that you're still virtual, do you think that that's going to stick around, or do you think it's going to go back to in person?
I don't know that it will ever go back to fully in person. But there are circumstances in which live hearings are being held.
Of course.
People can request a live hearing. And there are different reasons as to why, but I think we've also realized that there's a lot that can be accomplished, especially status hearings, pretrial hearings, it's accomplished virtually, which saves on travel for everyone and is, I think, far more efficient just in terms of the practice. And as long as the technology is working, this has been working pretty well.
Yeah, I always say technology is great as long as it works.
Right. Exactly.
Now, there are a lot of workers' comp firms that have these, statewide practices where they're running all over the place. Is your practice focused mainly here in the Berks County area, or do you work across the state?
We don't necessarily work across the state, but we do have different offices. So I, for example, am primarily based out of our Reading office, but we have an attorney in our Lancaster office. So he's handling Lancaster, Harrisburg, York, Gettysburg, that region. Okay. My partner, Mark Hogan, he is based out of our Allentown office. So he's handling that whole area. I mean, sometimes we have cases as far as Scranton, Hazleton, we have an office there. So, and Philadelphia, we have another office in Philadelphia as well. So I would say the eastern central area of Pennsylvania is really where we're focused.
Right, and it sounds like the way you guys are set up, your attorneys really can get to know the system and like the players, like you mentioned, how important that can be.
It is, and the doctors too, having those connections so that if a client needs treatment, we have connections in those communities to help people get the treatment they need.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, what is something that about what you do that most people wouldn't know that you think is important?
Well, I think the fee part is important, that I think a lot of people don't realize if they come to an attorney at my firm, whether it's for a work injury, a car accident, anything like that, we are not going to bill them. We are not going to charge them for our services. The only way we get paid is if we are successful in litigating something for them, filing suit, taking it to court, getting a decision, or getting a settlement. Mm-hmm. And I think that sometimes people hesitate and they procrastinate, or maybe not procrastinate is not the right word, but they're reluctant to go talk to someone because they're afraid of what it might cost. So I think that that's important for people to know that in this field, lawyers will typically, do a free consult, and they work on a contingent fee basis.
Yeah, that is good to know. Now, talking a little bit about you, are you originally from the Berks County area?
No, I'm originally from Delaware County, Upper Darby, right outside of Philadelphia.
Okay. And what brought you down to Berks County?
Well, I've kept migrating west, it seemed. And I actually had friends who were living right over by the hospital here in West Reading. So when my husband and I were looking for a home, we found a community in Exeter where they were building homes back in 2008, 2009, and moved out here. And we've been here ever since, and we love it. It's wonderful out here.
Well, wonderful. And what are some ways that you give back to the community?
So I currently sit on the boards for Neighborhood Housing Services of Greater Berks, which it's just an unbelievable organization that helps to provide affordable mortgages and second mortgages to individuals looking to become homeowners in Berks County, but actually even beyond Berks County. And my time on that board has just been so fulfilling. It's what the organization does is incredible. I think I love the idea of people becoming homeowners and investing into a community, because I think the more investment we have, the more pride we take. Just it's better for everyone involved. So that I encourage everyone to check out NHS and see what the organization is about, because it's fantastic. And I also sit on the board for the Salvation Army Reading Corps, which I think a lot of people have a general idea of what the Salvation Army provides for, but even before I was on the board, I didn't realize the full extent. I mean, they provide community services, food, services, helping people get into affordable housing, paying electric bills when there's funding for that. There's a violence prevention program now targeted towards the youth, and it's just, there's of course, the Kettle Drive every year raises money for the organization. There's a ton of gifts given out to children in the community, which is so rewarding. So it's a very, very, what I do for those organizations is such a small part. Just being on the board. But it's rewarding to be able to help give feedback in any way possible so that these organizations can continue to serve the people here in Berks County.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for all you do, and thank you for joining us today. And,
thank you.
If any of our listeners are looking to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
So I would say the best way would be to call our Reading office. The phone number is 610-374-8344. We have incredible staff there, and we have bilingual staff, Spanish and English speaking. So anyone can call there. My direct extension, if you want to call, is extension 1341. If someone's looking to get in touch with me directly, perhaps after hours. But as I said, our Reading staff can direct anyone in the right, direction.
Well, thank you, Beth. I appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure.